myself, every member here and beyond. As recounted by my wonderful Aunt Faith, who can't be with us today, she had mentioned that Edith had both purpose in life, had worked hard to better the lives of those around her. She was a bright and perceptive lady who gave of her time selfishly, and for sure we all loved her smile. As we all know, my mother, Linda Mahoney, is a huge intellect, talent, and a very charismatic woman. I'm going to get a little bit in retrospect here. When I was a boy, I found unfairness in small things, and in a frustration, I would often shout out loud a simple, for me, cleansing phrase meant to turn the table on that moment's injustice. But that's not fair. Yes, okay, but whoever said life is fair, David, was my mother's common and systematic refrain. And it's true, as a single divorced mother of two boys, my mom faced real-life challenges, and in retrospect, my mother's response was indeed a very mature response, albeit a slap of cold water to my naive and immature frustrations about daily injustices of life. Looking back now, my mother's purpose has been to have a full and equal opportunity to pass along her tools of knowledge and insights to those around her. Edith Miller, too, was a huge intellect and a talented and charming woman. Like my mother, her purpose has been to have a full and equal opportunity to pass along her own tools of knowledge and insight to those around her. And for that, we're all here today. In retrospect, it was not until my mother met Edith Miller that she would find a true companion and a partner for that common pursuit. Because with Edith, she shared a kindred understanding that the world, in fact, was not fair. In their loving relationship, these two strong, intelligent women were able to combine their intellect and charisma, thus improving their talents and continuing their lifelong pursuit together. Since I first came to know Edith in my mid-20s, she has always welcomed me with a warm embrace, with excellent and yummy food. And no matter what late hour I might be arriving, she made me and whatever friends, dogs, miscellaneous persons that I towed along with me more than 100% welcomed and comfortable at her house and what became our home. From what I understand, before she met Linda, Edith's house at 224 Thistle had been her financial and emotional fortress of solitude. This was a concept that I for sure have shared. For me too, my home has always represented my greatest financial and emotional asset. And the grace in which Edith shared her house, the manner in which her house became Edith and Linda's house, and in retrospect was completely and seamlessly became Linda's house as well, just made us very, very lucky. And I just felt that she more than opened her home, but she, in fact, it was a gesture. She basically was opening her whole heart to my mother. Her whole heart to my mother, and an extension, and I know that our entire family feels this, that she embraced my mother's loved ones and those lucky enough to pass time, discussions, and laughter with her. For me, this home away from home has been a wonderful gift, and it will be sorely missed. Page 3. Whether playing my mother's favorite game, Trivial Pursuit, or in random discussions, Edith demonstrated the great scope and wealth of her knowledge. People who know me know that I love a good debate. I'm an attorney. But with Edith, after these discussions, I was left at a loss because I had one of two options. Number one, I either didn't know what I was talking about, or number two, Edith was misrepresenting the truth. I remember retreating to Google on several occasions, only to verify that number one was in fact the truth, and I was just purely ignorant on that subject. She was remarkable in terms of what she'd experienced. She was the Encyclopedia Brown of our family, I think. Most of us have had the same experience with my mother. And in this and in so many small ways, Edith proved herself to be the ideal match and the ideal spouse for my mother. Over the course of the years, she demonstrated this in several different ways. One of the most profound was that Edith actually managed to give up smoking, despite an obvious love for the practice. My grandfather's death had been hastened by smoking, and I think I'm right in crediting Edith that she made the sacrifice for my mother. Edith was 100% and completely devoted to my mother. I simply never heard Edith speak ill of Linda, and she would often demonstrate the loving and devoted reflex to defend her. Combined, they were two strong forces at one and harmoniously pointed in the same direction. And the rare times that they came at odds, which were mostly settled by GPS, by the way, Edith was quick to de-escalate the discussion, and within short order, the clouds would lift easily, and the day was free to move on. As most of us know, in any couple, this is a great gift. As for me, Edith and Linda have certainly made me more cognizant of the social divide between the sexes. As a white male, it's true that I've often enjoyed the wind at my back, and that experience of having the wind at my back in most things in life. This is not to say that life has been entirely fair at all times, but it has indeed been good to me. Over the years, Edith's perspective and at times her defense of their common cause has been overwhelmingly positive and helpful to me. Edith's personality was such that she simply would not accept or give in to bullshit. Edith was an antiquarian, and one of the objects I most admire in their home is a small bronze statue of a woman in motion. This woman is also armed with a bow and arrow in hand. This bronze of what I believe is the goddess Diana will always symbolize to me the beauty and finesse of women, but in particular is an expression and a reminder that to be great, a woman must be determined and persistent, if not armed, in order to reach her potential. Quickly distinguished, sometimes a man simply has to show up. So I'm showing up today. I'm very glad to be here with you all. And whoever said life was fair, but it's our continued responsibility to work on that together. And I'm glad to say that Edith had a big and varied life, full of experiences, challenges, and achievements. Over the past years, Edith shared her enthusiasm about her retirement years, speaking often of her excitement as the years and months were counting down. Sadly, one thing I know she was not able to fully achieve is a period of true retirement. Her illness simply came too soon, and she passed too soon for us. When I remember Edith, I will remember her broad smile and her warm laugh. It seems very unfair now that Edith will not be able to continue to share life's challenges and adventures with my mother. Thank you. The next person.
Edith Edwards Galloway President of Maryland Now, passed away on January 10th, 2018. Edith was a lifelong advocate for women's equality and worked tirelessly to advance political solutions to many issues, locally, statewide, and nationally. She was a political force, especially in Montgomery County in the past 10 years. She made it look so easy with her ready smile and can-do attitude. She was someone who never met a stranger. She could talk to anyone about almost anything. She would converse with folks waiting in line somewhere or in a grocery store, in a political event, wherever. We were all valued for our shared humanity by Edith. Edith was interested in us and welcomed us into her life. She told stories about growing up in Washington, D.C., roller skating on the church steps, visiting museums, the Easter egg hunt in the White House, getting out of class to watch a parade. Her daddy had a word of the day at the dinner table. It sounded so easy.
Edith Galloway was born on October 14, 1942 in Washington, D.C., and nothing was easy for her growing up. Her sister Margie and brother Jimmy were over a decade older than she was. At some point, probably early on, she learned that she was the third child required to keep her father from being drafted at the beginning of America's involvement in World War II. Her mother, the former prom queen, had married a local sports hero, but had not been dealing well with the realities of life as the wife of a high school coach, whose dreams of greatness had been crushed on the college football field, along with his broken legs. Edith's mother, also named Edith, had developed some status as the PTA mom for her older siblings, but she was not so interested now, and the child was not the raving beauty that her sister had been. Edith's daddy foresaw the shortages, which would arrive along with U.S. participation in the war, so he moved the family to Beltsville, Maryland, a rural crossroads, where they had a large victory garden. Edith's job as a 4-year-old was to feed the chickens and retrieve the eggs. Her mother hated living in the country, and the marriage deteriorated further. Edith started school a year early. Her parents, having determined that they needed a second income, altered her birth certificate and put her in the 1st grade. She was a latchkey kid before the concept had a name, standing on the milk box to unlock the door. Lacking the basic skills to keep up with her classmates, her daddy took up the slack, assigning everyone chores, so her mother would focus on being a secretary, also working for the government. He took Edith with him while he did the shopping on Saturday, and they picked up books at the public library. After the war, the family had moved back to D.C., where Edith was soon reading way beyond Dick and Jane, and somewhere found old math books which fascinated her. She spent nights reading and studying, and slept through classes. Her 2nd grade teacher had her tested for special ed, which resulted in the school skipping her a grade to provide more challenging coursework.
Susan Hurst. Edith's mother and father were both drinking by this point, but Edith was provided more stable role models in the summers when she stayed with her maternal grandparents in London, Kentucky, where her grandfather Edwards was a prominent businessman. Her grandmother took her to church and kept her busy, but she returned to parents who drank their dinner and were not aware that she was exploring D.C. at a tender age on her own, or with other kids whose parents didn't know or care where they were. She referred to herself during those years as a wild child, but most of the activities were innocent enough. She visited museums and skated on the church steps and played with her cat in the basement. At the end of the summer, she was 11. Edith's parents did not drive down to Kentucky to retrieve her. After weeks of worry and no phoning or other communication, The grandparents arranged for the DC police to check on Edith's mother and father. The ensuing phone call resulted in a trip to the local store for school clothes, and Edith started at Sue Bennett, a school run by the Methodists. In their tiny classes, she got the personal attention and academic challenges which helped her blossom into a scholar. The kids from her grandmother's church and her grandfather's prominence lent her the insider status necessary to get along in small-town Kentucky. She started calling her grandmother Mom and her grandfather Papa. She was tall for her age, thus was expected to match appearances with grown-up attitude and behavior, which reflected well on her grandparents. Edith commenced a lifetime of volunteer service by tutoring poor high school girls, bringing them home with her to milk and cookies, and teaching them to read fashion and teen magazines. She took correspondence classes in the summertime and pushed back when required to take both home economics as a science. She somehow managed to take both, but being one of few girls in the science classes. She was mentored in high school by a science teacher who arranged for a full scholarship to the University of Kentucky, but her grandmother would no longer take responsibility for Edith.
Jennifer Jones. A high school graduate at age 16, she was sent to live with her mother in Southeast DC, where her commute to American University included 2 bus transfers and an hour and a half each day. For spending money, she worked after school as a file clerk at a car dealership. She enrolled in difficult classes and struggled to keep up. She met a handsome guy, Luther Miller, in the military and got engaged to him. Married at age 17, Edith moved to Port Arthur, Texas, where Luther worked at the refinery. They initially lived with his Cajun parents, but soon bought a small place where Edith kept house and raised German Shepherd puppies to add to their income. She later worked at the local newspaper in the accounting department and then in a brokerage house. After miscarriages and a stillborn child, the domestic violence accelerated, and she finessed a transfer to the New York office of the brokerage house she'd been working for. Edith started a new life in New York City, adapting yet again to an unfamiliar setting. She worked hard to lose her accent and fit in. This was the 1970s, and the women's movement was pushing for equal opportunities. She soon recruited to learn more about the stockbroker business, then to study for the required exam. Edith excelled and was in the first cadre of women licensed stockbrokers. She had stories about the sexual harassment on Wall Street, where there were some guys who would look for opportunities to brush by an unsuspecting secretary as she was bent over filing. She became a member of the National Organization for Women in their Brooklyn chapter. She did well as a stockbroker, staying up late for hours to do the calculations and forecasting now done by computers in seconds. She had discretionary money and time, and so started traveling, exploring Montreal, Puerto Rico, and Cancun, and riding horses on the weekend. But the pressure of being responsible for clients' financial futures and being on call to her clients 24/7 ultimately drove her out of the business. She bought an antique shop in Manhattan, which flourished. But when the crime got too bad, she moved the shop to Bethesda, Maryland. The location did not generate the volume of foot traffic needed to hold her interest. When her boyfriend, a former stockbroker and partner in the business, beat and almost killed her, Edith shuttered the antique store and moved in with her brother.
Holly chose a letter to read
started helping her brother with his millworking business, reviewing accounts and taking classes on construction management, and ultimately running the office. She volunteered at the County Crisis Center, where many calls were from domestic violence victims, and she received the Volunteer of the Year award in 1991 from Montgomery County for her work on the hotline and her dedication, volunteering over 500 hours while working full-time. She met an unemployed law school graduate and fell in love, this time with a woman. After the brothers' company was pushed into bankruptcy, Edith struggled financially selling off antiques left over from her business. Linda Mahoney moved in and supported the couple by doing paralegal work. They gardened and furnished the house from yard sales and became more committed to each other and to working for those less advantaged. Edith leveraged her accounting experience and went to work for the American Chemical Society, an association of chemists. She recently retired after 22 years with ACS, where she started as a clerk in the accounts payable department and moved up in finance to budget analyst. She was a team player who loved working with her colleagues and the various departmental personnel. Edith regretted her inability to attend the University of Kentucky after she graduated from high school at age 16 and her lack of success at American University. At ACS, through her employer, she was eligible for educational expenses, and she started attending classes at night and on the weekends at the University of Maryland University College, studying after work and during vacation days. It was a long commitment, culminating almost a decade later, but definitely something she was very proud of achieving. After she graduated cum laude from UMUC in 2002, she continued volunteering on state, congressional, and presidential political campaigns in Maryland and states as far as Texas. She joined the Montgomery County Now chapter and served in officer positions. A longtime supporter of the ACLU, she also served on the board of the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women.
Edith was proud to have inherited her feminist activism. Her grandmother, Anna Edwards, was arrested as a suffragist demonstration, and in 1934 was the first woman in Kentucky to acquire a driver's license after going to court to enforce the state guidelines. In her later years, Edith supported a Forever Home dog rescue. Besides monetary contributions, she volunteered her time to inspect potential adoption homes, traveling as far as Frederick on behalf of the dogs and the organization. Edith's life was the ultimate lesson in the importance of resilience and learning to be grateful for the opportunities you have, not focusing on the obstacles that you have had to overcome.
one with all the glory, and you were the one with all the strength. Beautiful face without a name for so long. A beautiful smile to hide the pain. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. It might have appeared to go unnoticed,
Where they had a victory garden, she briefly had a fox terrier named Penny, who got away from her sister and was run over by a car on the highway. The other day, we discovered a poem written about, quote, the dog, unquote, clipped from a newspaper in 1948, along with Penny's licenses. In her 70s, Edith still talked about Penny and kept a stiff replica in her bedroom next to a sweet photo of her grandmother with her mother as a young child and other similar treasures. When she was 6, she had a cat that lived in the basement and tolerated being dressed up for tea parties. From the time she was married and living in Texas, she had a succession of dogs, mostly German Shepherds, until her Keyshawn mixed Fudgy, acquired as a puppy in New York, who moved to Maryland with her and was her wonderful companion for almost 19 years. Her ill-tempered, but beloved, I know, Lhasa Apso Dylan, a rescue dog, is the sole survivor. Edith also loved horses. She probably started riding in Texas. She continued to ride and took lessons when she worked in Manhattan. One weekend, she went out to the stable and someone else was riding her horse. It had been a rental until she demanded the price and wrote a check. She had many stories to tell about her Pollyanna and the friends she made at the stables. When Edith moved back to Maryland, she had retired Pollyanna, so was back to renting horses, a good way to make new friends. In the late 1980s,